Have you ever gone over your notes, rewatched a lecture, or highlighted a textbook, and it felt like you really understood it, but then when the exam came, or even just a few days later, it was like your brain had never seen it before? This is because your brain was tricked by what's called the fluency illusion, and it's one of the most common reasons people don't actually improve even after hours of studying. When something starts to feel familiar because you've read it before or seen it on a video, your brain mistakes that for understanding. But recognition doesn't mean recall, and unless you can bring the idea back out without any prompts, you don't really know it. And research backs this and shows how it's actually negatively impacting you, because it's shown that the more we passively review, the more confident we feel, even if we can't retrieve or apply the knowledge when it matters, giving false confidence. I learned this the hard way. I'm Salim, a medical doctor living in London, and across 3 university degrees, I spent years doing what felt like studying, reading, rewatching, and highlighting, but not much of it stuck. But things started to change when I came across this principle. If you can't explain it without looking, you don't actually know it. So now, before I review anything, I test myself first, even if it's just for 2 minutes. It forces me to see what I actually know and what I don't know. That might be through quick practice questions, or even using AI to generate a few foundational prompts I should be able to answer before diving into the topics. This is one of the 5 science-backed learning principles I'll go through in this video that can help you learn faster, remember more, and finally stop wasting time on methods that don't work. These principles helped me get through my studies without burning out, so I could do well academically and still have time for the rest of my life. And the final principle is what helps you remember things weeks or even months later that most people skip out on. So stick around if you want your study sessions to finally stick for good. So now that you've stopped mistaking familiarity for knowledge, the next principle is about what real learning actually looks like. Because real learning isn't about how much you read or how many lectures you've watched. That's just consumption. Real learning comes from conversion. Because your brain doesn't learn information by copying and pasting. It learns by encoding. And what does this mean? This just means taking in new information and then transforming it into a format your brain actually understands. That's why rereading and passive watching don't stick. They stay in short-term memory and fade fast. But when you actively do something with what you've just learned, that's when it starts to stick. And there's a few ways to make that happen. The first is the Feynman technique. Explain the concept in your own words as simply as possible, like you're teaching it to someone who's never seen it before. You can also draw it out, sketch a diagram, or turn it into a quick mind map. Anything that helps you visualize and restructure the information. This mental effort is what builds neural connections, because in addition to storing the information, you're processing it too, whilst testing what you converted. And this is where retrieval comes in, because if you can't pull an idea out of your head and apply it without looking, you never really learned it in the first place. Retrieval isn't just something you save for the end of the week or when it's time to sit your exams. It's what fuels this entire learning process. So from now on, every time you take something in, do something with it. Don't just sit there and move on, because if it goes in and doesn't come back out, it was never really there. So once you're actively converting what you learn and testing yourself, there's something else just as important that people overlook. If you're studying feels too easy, it probably isn't working, because real learning isn't smooth. It's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is a good sign. It means your brain is working harder to retrieve, reorganize, or resolve confusion, which actually strengthens your memory in the long run. I see a lot of parallels between learning and going to the gym. If you're always lifting the lightest weights, it's easy, but you won't get stronger. Both memory and muscle growth follow the idea of desirable difficulty, where putting in effort leads to better results. So if you're just casually highlighting or watching videos thinking you've understood, take a moment to rethink that approach. Because even though fluency feels good, if you're not struggling even a little, you're probably not encoding the information deeply. So one way to lean into this is to ask yourself, where am I struggling the most? Instead of just asking the simple question of, do I understand this? The parts that are hard to explain or apply are exactly where your brain is still working to build connections that you should then spend more time on. And this isn't just theory. The psychologist behind this idea pointed out that conditions which make learning feel easy often fail to support long-term retention. So when something feels hard or effortful, you should lean into it, because that struggle is actually a sign that you're learning. Now that you know struggle is actually a sign you're learning, the next step is to understand how your brain stores that information. Your brain doesn't learn by memorizing every single fact or sentence as you might try to do with a PDF or textbook. Your brain looks for patterns or frameworks. This is what cognitive load theory and chunking theory explain. The key idea is that you're not meant to remember every little detail, rather you should aim to grasp the structure of an idea. For example, a process might follow a pattern like A to B to C, with a few exceptions, or a concept could be this type of X turns into Y under condition Z. And to make it simple, think about water changing states. You know water freezes into ice, which is X to Y, when the temperature drops below 0 degrees Celsius, condition Z. Here, instead of memorizing a long list of facts about ice, you just remember the simple pattern. Water turns into ice when it's cold enough, and that's how your brain likes to learn, by spotting patterns and conditions. A practical way to apply this is through what I call a structural summary. Instead of focusing on all the details, focus on the shape or flow of the concept. For example, heart failure is just about a pump not working well, leading to backflow, which then causes a cluster of symptoms. And another useful tip is to compare related ideas, and this might be asking, how is left-sided heart failure different from right-sided? These contrasts help strengthen memory and deepen your understanding. So this principle combines chunking, structural summaries, and active contrasts, all reliable ways to compress information into meaningful patterns instead of collecting endless facts. Now that you understand how your brain organizes information into patterns, it's important to know what actually makes your brain pay attention in the first place. Because if you can't focus for more than 10 minutes, your learning is limited to just that, and that's not very useful. Something you've probably noticed is that your brain learns best when it cares, when the information feels meaningful or purposeful. And that's why a lot of studying at school or uni feels like a chore. You're often just learning for exams, not because you're interested in the material. And there's a scientific reason for this. Studies show your hippocampus, the part of your brain involved in learning and memory, encodes information much better when it has emotional or real-world relevance. So without that sense of purpose, it makes sense why your brain checks out, even if you spend hours studying. So before you start a study session, ask yourself, why does this matter? Not just for passing an exam, but how does it connect to something you actually care about or might use in real life? When I was in med school, I found that connecting my studies to a bigger goal, like becoming a good doctor, gave me a real emotional anchor, even when the material itself felt dry or irrelevant. And if you can't find a big picture reason right now, what helps is to set a focus filter. Pick 3 clear things that you want to understand, explain, or apply in that study session. Having that clear direction primes your brain to stay alert and engaged. So purpose helps your brain stay focused, and that focus is what lets you truly remember and learn. Now for a quick update, I'm working on building an online course and community and would highly appreciate your feedback and input. So check out the links in the description. It would help me out a lot if you would provide some feedback in terms of what you find helpful from my videos and what you feel would help even more as part of a course or community. Thank you in advance, and now back to the video. So now that you've got purpose driving your focus, there's one last thing to understand. Learning doesn't end when you stop studying. It doesn't end when you close your book or stop watching a video. A lot of learning happens after your study session during something called consolidation. This is when your brain takes fresh information and slowly turns it into long-term memory. And this process mainly happens after the session ends, especially while you sleep or when you revisit the material later through retrieval. But this is an issue for most people, because most people finish a video or chapter and just move on, and on top of that, many people don't sleep well either. So your brain doesn't get the chance it needs to properly rebuild and strengthen those connections. And if you don't reinforce what you learn through active recall or mental linking, most of it fades. So a simple habit I recommend is taking just 5 minutes after each session to close everything and mentally reconstruct what you just learned. Don't repeat it word for word. Just recall the key structure or flow, like we talked about earlier with learning in patterns. Then ask yourself, what confused me the most? Because that's the part to revisit tomorrow. And if exams are coming up, try writing a few questions for your future self. It sets up spaced repetition and creates just enough mental tension to make your brain pay attention the next time you come back to it. So now that you've got the right approach to learning, the time you spend studying will actually start to count. But even if you want to study, there's another challenge that gets in the way, and that's your mental health. Because when you're feeling low, just getting started can feel impossible. And honestly, watching videos like this might even be a form of escape. And in those moments, even the best learning system won't be enough. You need something simple that works with your energy, not against it. Back in med school, and even now as a doctor, I've had days where even small tasks felt like too much, but I found ways to keep moving forward without burning out. And in this video here, I'll walk you through how to work and study when your mental health is struggling, so you can start rebuilding even on your worst days. So click the video to learn more.